Wednesday, everybody. It's Jim, it's Amadeus, and we're here to have some fun, talk about soccer and football and baseball and all kinds of interesting things. Last night, Amadeus, you were talking about those Cubbies and those Milwaukee Brewers just couldn't put the guys across the plate.
Yeah, it was disappointing, and there's something that I saw a lot with the Blue Jays last year as they led the league in not scoring with runners in scoring position, and then sure enough, it was like every inning we would get two guys on base with one out, and then nothing would happen. So, very disappointing game there for sure.
Well, it's funny how the situations like that go where you'll look up and see all the traffic on the bases and nobody's going anywhere. And, or they'll get two guys on with two outs or three guys on with no outs and still, guy pulls a Houdini situation and gets out of it. So, yeah, I mean, both those teams, 1-0 game had a lot of hit and a lot of traffic on the base. So
yeah, it wasn't just like they were just getting on base with walks and stuff. The hits were there. It just didn't come when it mattered most.
Right. And there's all you're sitting there going, and it was a dramatic win for Chicago because now they took a game off of their race with the Brewers, and so from that standpoint, very important. But again, it all boils down to you got to score those runs, and the Cubbies were able to hold on. And that's not really – those two teams' MO is not to have a low-scoring 1-0 baseball game. That might be the only one of those they've had all year. I can't remember the last time the Cubs and Milwaukee played to a 1-0 draw. I mean, a 1-0 result. They just don't do that. It's usually, above 4, like 4-3, 5, 5-4, something like that. I mean, they score runs, but last night couldn't get that hit at the timely time. And for the Cubs, that was a good thing. For the Milwaukee Brewers, not so much. So there you go in that regard. What do we like today over on the soccer side?
Yeah, so not too big of a Wednesday here. We do have 3 of the Champions League qualifying matches finishing up there. AEK Athens is at home to Royal Antwerp. Antwerp comes into that one with a 1-0 lead on aggregate, but Athens has been very good this season, especially at home. So it'll be interesting to see what Antwerp does in their trip to Greece. But wouldn't shock me if Athens wins that one, and they are the -150 favorite. So that one's going to be a good one. Then we also have Copenhagen and Rakow Częstochowa. Now this Rakow team, they've really they've been impressive in these qualifying matches, but they come into this one on the road down 1-0 from the home leg, and Copenhagen has been in very good form lately. So tough to see Rakow beating them on the road. Copenhagen will likely, they're also a team that's a -154 favorite, and they'll probably win that match at home just to secure the advance. And then the other one on the board is PSV and Rangers. Rangers pulled off the 2-2 draw at home, but that's not going to be good enough against a much stronger PSV team from the Dutch league. And now PSV is going to be at home for this leg, and they're about a -200 favorite. So tough to see the Rangers getting by in that tie.
Well, there you go. So it's an exciting day of action, and those events, those games have not yet started. So we got some time to see them later in the day. Today we got some day baseball to give you a real quick check around the majors. The Phillies are up 3-2 over the Angels. That game being played in Philadelphia. That's the middle of the 4th inning. Bottom of the 3rd inning, it is the White Sox 7, the Orioles 4. There's your there's what you were looking for in the Cubs and Cubs and Brewers game last night. 7-4 in the bottom of the 3rd. White Sox over the Orioles. That game being played at Camden Yard. Bottom 4, Cleveland and Minnesota scoreless. Padres and Cardinals are going to get underway at 3:07. Cubs, of course, and the Brew Crew, they're going to get underway here at about the bottom of the hour, about 2:20. Then at 3:07, it'll be the Blue Jays hosting the Nationals up at the Rogers Center. And 3:45, a lot of day baseball here. We've got the Giants hosting the Reds. That's a big game for both teams in the wild card race. Astros and Red Sox at 4:10. That's the first pitch for that game. Then we got another 4:10 first pitch, Mariners and Athletics. 6:40 tonight. That game's being played, in Flushing Meadows, and that's the Mets and the Rangers. The Rays and Marlins. That's another 6:40 start. Yankees Tigers 6:40 start in Detroit. That's Cole and excuse me a second. That's Cole for the Yankees. I don't have a picture for the Tigers.
Yeah, I don't have one for the Tigers either.
8:10, it's the Pirates and the Royals. 8:40, it's the Rockies hosting the Braves. By the way, let me give you those pictures. For the Pirates and the Royals, it's Jackson for Pittsburgh, Zerpa for the Royals, Braves, Rockies, it's Vins for Atlanta, Freeland for Colorado, and then the D-backs at 10:10 start at Chavez Ravine in Los Angeles, Dodgers. It is Facade pitching for Arizona, Pure Point for the Dodgers. So that's what's going on right now in baseball. We'll check it a little bit later as well. So there's a lot going on. Standings wise, we'll real quick go to the wild card races so that we can keep you posted on those. The wild card race right now is let's see. There you go. The wild card race. They need standings. Great. I didn't ask you for standings. I asked you for the wild card. So here we go. All right, here we go. Tampa Bay is 5.5 games up in the wild card space, and they are holding down the first wild card spot. Seattle, Texas, and Houston are in a dead heat for that second spot. Toronto is 3.5 games out, and Boston 6.5 out in what is a wild ride for the wild card spots in the American League. Over in the National League, Philly is 5 games up, and the Cubbies are 1 game up in slots 1 and 2 of the wild card. San Francisco eked by Cincinnati now, and they are in that third spot. Arizona's a half game out. Cincinnati's 2 games out. Miami's 3 games out in the wild card race. So some crazy stuff going on in Major League Baseball with regard to the wild card races and who's going to end up having a postseason and who's not. So there you go. We got some wild situations here though in college football, and I'll just run down a quick note. This is tomorrow's schedule. Okay, Kent State at UCF. That game so far has not been postponed because of the hurricane. So we'll keep you posted on that. That's a 7:00 kick on FS1. Elon is at Wake Forest. That is 7:00 on the ACC network. Theoretically, that could possibly be some hurricane situations. Not obviously the hurricane, but the rains and such. So we'll have to keep an eye on whether or not that game gets off. On Rhode Island and Georgia State, that game is being played in Atlanta. That's a 7:00 start. St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and Western Michigan. That's 7:00 start. NC State, Connecticut, 7:30 start. Nebraska, Minnesota. That's a Fox game. That's an 8:00 start. Also at 8:00, Florida at Utah on ESPN. South Dakota at Missouri. UABP at Tulsa. And North Carolina A&T at UAB. That's also an 8:00 start. And then the late game, Southern Utah against Arizona State. on the Pac-12 network. That's a 10 o'clock start. So they're normally there's maybe one or two games on a Thursday night. The Mac Attack, but not so much. This time we have a whole slew of games on Thursday night. So there you go. Some college football right out of the gate in that case. So interesting stuff. You've got some good, you got Nebraska and Minnesota. I mean, we talked the other day about, teams starting the season with what was Conference USA, wasn't it? That we were talking about where they started and had the first game was their first game. Well, Nebraska, Minnesota, right out of the gate on 8 o'clock on Fox tomorrow night. Open the season. Two Big Ten teams open the season right out of the gate in Minnesota.
Yeah, there's been a few of those we've seen. Obviously, in week 0, there was the 2 Conference USA matchups. But
right.
Yeah, now we have the Big Ten seems to be doing it a lot in this week 1 because we have Nebraska, Minnesota. Ohio State takes on Indiana. Rutgers and Northwestern play each other. So, yeah, a lot of Big Ten conference games to start the season right off the bat. Even Louisville and Georgia Tech, that's an ACC conference game tomorrow. So and obviously Clemson and Duke on the Monday there. So yeah, definitely a lot of surprisingly a lot of conference games to open up these first week 0 and week 1.
There is one tomorrow, which is kind of funny, and that is because I don't think they've played each other. I don't know if they've ever played each other, but I don't think they've played each other certainly in the last decade or so. And that's Miami of Ohio against Miami of Florida. So we know one thing: Miami's going to win. What we don't know,
the Miami Bowl,
right? The Miami Bowl. So that's a Friday night game, and it's interesting. We've got Central Michigan against Michigan State tomorrow. Let's see, what would be the Louisville, Georgia Tech, as you said. That's going to be a real right out of the gate. Missouri State and Kansas shouldn't be much of, and Stanford and Hawaii. For those of you who would like to watch a game, it starts off at 11 o'clock. You got a place to go. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on, and interesting to say the least. So we had 7 games tomorrow night I have to send a note to Tim Brando, who last week was in San Diego, and now he's in East Lansing, Michigan. So there's a definite change of temperatures going from East Lansing to San Diego in that game. But yeah, from your standpoint, have you seen anything on the board here either tomorrow or Friday that piques your attention or gets you interested?
Yeah, there's been a few games that I've been looking at. One actually, I'm very curious what's going on in this Florida-Utah game, because that was one where Utah opened up as a 7.5 point favorite.
Right.
Then there was the news that Cam Rising wasn't going to be ready for week 1, so they moved it down to 4.5. Then over the weekend, while week 0 was going, the spread got back up to 7.5. So it seemed like Cam Rising was going to play. And now, as of this morning, it's back down to 4.5. So I guess he's leaning towards not playing. And I know that's a game you'll be watching, obviously, because your Florida Gators are playing in that one. So maybe you have a chance there, Jim, with no Cam Rising playing, because I don't think the backup for Utah is ready to go either.
Well, their backup quarterbacks are for Utah are their 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks. The other 2 guys, unfortunately, got injured. The Gators, starting Graham Mertz, who played last year at Wisconsin, they're hoping that he can be kind of like someone who can manage a game and not lose it for you, because they've got enough talent around him to win, but they have to they really don't have a a strong quarterback room at this point. They get a lot of young kids in the quarterback room, and frankly, their quarterback is playing. He threw for 4 touchdowns and ran for another last week in his high school game at the IMG Academy. He's committed to Florida, but and the funny thing is that Florida actually over the summer had conversations with Cam Rising about perhaps moving down to play for the Gators. But at that point in time, Rising was coming off this injury, which clearly he may or may not be able to play in the game against Florida. So he felt that his best way of going through this is just stay in Utah to finish things out, and you can't blame him for that. So there's a lot of I don't think this is going to be I don't think one team is going to dominate the other in this game. I think it's going to be just like last year, where it is really close, and I do think Utah's got the better team. Even if Cam Rising doesn't play, I think they've got they're much more seasoned team, and they're playing at home. And I don't know what the heck was in the heads of Billy, the Florida coach whose name Billy Napier. There you go, Napier, because they left Florida a day early because of the hurricane. But instead of flying to Salt Lake City, they flew to Dallas, and then they flew this morning up to Salt Lake. You would think that you would want to get your team up there, give them a day to go out and practice in altitude, as opposed to just flying up there today and do a walkthrough in altitude. So I don't know what they were thinking, but we'll find out tomorrow. But
as you mentioned before, they don't really travel west of the Mississippi that often. So
No.
Clearly they don't know what to do in this travel situation.
Yeah, they somebody might have made a phone call to figure that one out. Because look, it's not Denver, all right. So yeah, it's not the Mile High, but it's still altitude, and it's going to cause problems. Just like Utah came down and last year melted away because of the playing in 90-degree heat with 87% humidity. So you've got that going on your side. So I don't know. If I'm Florida, I want to get up there and get a little bit of feel for what it's going to be like. But I hope they have a lot of oxygen around, because these guys are going to be gassed by halftime. So it'll be interesting. That is for sure. But at least we're getting some certainly some name teams and some quality teams playing football right off of week 1, and that'll be fun. I mean, it's we've talked about everything, but there's been so much realignment talk about teams moving from one conference to the next, that we're just it's getting old. I think everybody wants to see them play football and stop talking about what conference, who's going to be in what conference. So we get to see them play this weekend. So that's a good thing. And Kent State, by the way, who is playing that game, UCF in Orlando. Kent State and UCF used to play together when UCF was in the MAC for a brief period of time. And then they moved to Conference USA, and then they moved to the Big East, which became the American, and then now they're on to the Big 12. So Kent State, and you can't sleep on Kent State. That's if UCF does, they'll rue the day they did that, because Kent State is one of those MAC teams, and MAC teams are always prepared and always difficult to beat. And we'll see how that works out in there. So anyway. The Saturday games are too numerous at the moment to mention. We'll get to them on Friday, but it's going to be fun to get to watch some of this stuff for a change. And we got baseball, we got soccer, and we got college. And then a week from today, a week from tomorrow, we'll have NFL football.
Yep, the pros will be back, and it'll be interesting to see how all these teams turn out. You know, obviously we got Bryce Young going to be playing for Carolina. C.J. Stroud was finally announced as the Houston starter. So yeah, it's a lot of lot. We're going to see a lot of rookies out there right from day one. So
Yeah, right from the get go. I don't know. I do you have a feel for one of those guys being and Anthony Richardson starting for Indianapolis?
yeah, tons going on. I saw Bailey Zappi was cut by the Patriots yesterday as well.
Really?
Yeah. So
He
that
won't,
was a
he won't
shock.
last long on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I would pick him up just because I liked what I saw from Bailey Zappi last year, and he played at Western Kentucky, and
Mhm.
obviously we saw what Mike White,
Right.
former Western Kentucky quarterback, and
Mhm.
that's what happens when you play in a system where you throw the ball 50 times a game, because
Right.
obviously that's what Western Kentucky is known for. No run game, all pass. So that's the thing, though, is you're going to produce. You may not produce the best quarterbacks, but you're going to produce guys that know how to throw the ball and throw the ball accurately, at least because they're
Right.
going to have a lot of practice there. So that was a shock to me. That's obviously we know there's a lot going on between Belichick and Robert Kraft right now, and
Mhm.
obviously Mac Jones is must have been upset about having QB competition there. So that probably played a part into it. But I don't think Mac Jones is the answer for the Patriots going forward. So we'll see. I hope Bailey Zappi or I hope somebody picks him up off the waivers. It would be nice if my Cardinals grabbed him, but someone's gonna grab him, I think.
I thought about you the other day watching the USC game because the offensive coordinator at USC, is your old pal, the former coaches, the Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury. And
Should have stayed in Thailand or wherever the hell he was at
I
the end of the
forget where
season.
he wanted to go to, some Zen thing. And
Booked a one-way trip,
right,
picks up a job 2 weeks later. Like, whatever, get out of here.
he's back playing. He's back working with Lincoln Riley. Yeah, no, the other thing, and this kind of flew under the radar, was Trey Lance going to Dallas
Yeah,
and
I did.
being the third string quarterback in Dallas. I mean, I, I'm I was confused. I thought, all right, if they trade him, you said, you were talking about Belichick and his he doesn't want to go the route with, with Mac Jones, and I'm thinking, well, there's Trey Lance, and right now that they'll take a ham sandwich for him, and basically he went to Dallas to back up Dak Prescott. He's either going to come out of this as the most underrated, guy who finally gets a chance and shows his stuff, or he might be as big a bust at quarterback since Ryan Leaf got drafted.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Trey Lance really. It seems like the Dak Prescott era is coming to an end in Dallas.
I would have thought that 3 years ago, but what do I think?
A lot of people would have thought that 3 years ago, Jim, but this is where we're at. So clearly they're getting ready. And I mean, Cooper Rush wasn't terrible in the games he had to play. So that's why really this Dallas team is looking to do something. And it was an interesting move. I don't hate it for the 49ers because I really do think Brock Purdy is a good fit for them because that's the thing is like, do you really need Trey Lance, a running quarterback, to go with your strong running scheme and all that, right? And like you had Jimmy G, and he's a good quarterback, but he's more of a game manager. And we obviously saw when Brock Purdy took over the offense last year, all of a sudden they started scoring, more than 30 points a game, which was really they weren't doing that in the first half of the season. So I think having Brock Purdy as the quarterback brings more of an air element and a little more dangerous, especially when you have like some of the top players at every position on your offense. You got Deebo Samuel as wide receiver, you got George Kittle as your tight end, and now Christian Christian McCaffrey as your running back. Like how can you not have a good offense with that? All you really need is a guy to use those weapons. And obviously Brock Purdy showed his flashes this year. You expect him to take a step this season.
Well, the other thing too, which can't be overlooked, is they have a very good, solid offensive line, and that helps. But Brock Purdy came out of Iowa State, and that offense, they ran basically a quick strike offense, very up tempo, very good, get the ball out of your hands in 3 seconds type offense. And so I think what Shanahan saw in Brock Purdy was, okay, well, let's take a flyer. He was the last guy drafted. Let's take a flyer on this kid, and because I like the offense he played in. I like the way he played in that offense. And it was funny because it was almost like a plug and play, right? When he got the opportunity to do it, it was like he had been there before. And, I think that in and to itself was impressive. I mean, he didn't make many mistakes for a kid who, basically wasn't on anybody's radar as being a professional quarterback.
Yeah, and obviously, the college system these kids come from is very important. As you pointed out, playing at Iowa State helped him when he was inserted into this offense, because all of a sudden they had more of a passing game. Just like the same way we saw the Patriots offense get more through the air with Bailey Zappi, a guy who came from a heavy passing offense. So obviously, the Patriots don't want to move in that direction. They're going to probably go back to the smash mouth running style with Mac Jones. But obviously, there's going to be a team out there with a heavy passing offense that they'll take a shot on Bailey Zappi. And considering how Tom Brady was the last guy drafted in the draft, I don't think it really matters where these guys go. Brock Purdy is just the next Tom Brady at the way he got drafted. But obviously we'll see. But he's been handed a very nice situation. He's got a great defense over in San Francisco. And obviously he's got all this talent on the offense, when really he also has a coach that schemes his way to wins and doesn't even need the talent on the team. The talent is just like the cherry on top, because Kyle Shanahan, he finds ways to scheme to victory. That's what they were doing at the beginning of last season, when they were rolling Trey Lance out in that first game and then Jimmy G afterwards. But yeah, I think they'll find something this season with Purdy starting from the beginning.
And the other thing too, and this is something that we all look at this stuff from 40,000 feet, but what's often not mentioned about San Francisco is they've got a hell of a defense, and they were able to win a lot of close games. And so Kyle Shanahan had the benefit, when you've got quarterback issues, which he had till Brock Purdy stepped in and played, that his defense would bail him out of mistakes, or of being able to teach somebody to be a quarterback on the fly, which is what he had to do. And so that defense has saved Shanahan's bacon for a couple of years, and they don't seem to be any worse for wear this year. So it's a good. I would have to say personally that if I were to rank the top teams in the West, you got to look at San Francisco right at the top of that list, because I don't see anybody in that division that's going to, the Seahawks perhaps, maybe, but I'm sorry, but I'm still not sold on Geno yet, that he's going to be the guy for Pete Carroll's team. And I'm also not sure that Pete Carroll wants to do this, for much longer. So we'll have to see how that goes. The Rams, I don't have a read on. I just have nothing there. I don't know what they're in. I've seen them a little bit, watched them in preseason, no clue. There's no consistency of anything with the Rams on that side. Your Cardinals, I have no read on them either. So I don't know. They can all, both of them could step up and win. Who knows? But I do think at least going into the early part of the season, I think the 49ers are going to be tough.
Yeah, as someone who watches this division a lot, obviously, because my team plays in it, I got to agree with you. I think the 49ers are the team to beat by far in the NFC West. And, I've seen a lot of people down on the 49ers this year. They expect them to take a step back. They don't think Brock Purdy is going to be as good. But I just think there's too much talent. As you said, the defense is great every year. There's all this talent on the offense. All they've really missed is that plug-in quarterback, and they seem to have it with Brock Purdy now. And really, it's something that if you really take a look at the 49ers schedule last season, those early games, because they finished 13-4, and those early games they were winning, but as you said, they were very close defensive wins a lot of the time where they weren't scoring a lot. And then when you look at their games in the second half as they were rolling towards the playoffs, when Purdy started to play, every game it was like they were all of a sudden scoring over 30 points. So there was definitely a massive change in that offense under Purdy. And I don't know. Every year I hear the 49ers are supposed to be this bad team, but every year they put out a winning product with Kyle Shanahan and that defense. The same way how every year I hear about how the Chargers are going to win the division and the Chargers fail to do something every single year. So I'm not buying it on these teams like the 49ers and the Chargers.
Okay, so we'll go through the NFL at another time, but this one is too juicy not to throw to you. We talked a little bit about Jimmy G going to Vegas. I just think that there's something going on there that just might be special. I do not, under any circumstances, disrespect in any way, shape, or form, or downplay the Kansas City Chiefs, or Denver, or any of the teams, in the West. But there's something special about Jimmy G's reunited back, getting back with, McDaniel that I think just might be something to watch.
Yeah, I'm kind of high on the Raiders this year. Mm-hmm. They're a team that again, just like the Buccaneers, they're like the last team at plus 1,200 to win that division. But obviously Kansas City is the team to beat. They've established that kind of dynasty over the last few years. But yeah, as you said, there's always this hype around the Chargers. Mm-hmm. And every year, we see defense isn't as good as it's supposed to be. Justin Herbert has some kind of injury that throws the season off, and they never end up doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I'm not buying in on the Chargers. Now there's all this hype around the Denver Broncos. The same hype last year because it's a Super Bowl roster that was missing a starting quarterback. Okay, they got their starting quarterback, but the coach wasn't fit. So now this year, last year it was all around Russell Wilson. This year, all the hype is around Sean Payton being there. Right. But again, Sean Payton, as great as he is, he's a very good coach, but you still have a very good defense there. But the offense, I don't know, the offense just doesn't move the needle for me with Russell Wilson. Even with another quarterback in it, like there's not a whole ton of weapons. The running game isn't strong. The running backs are always injured. The wide receivers are always injured. So where's the talent on this offense? And then as you said, the Raiders, they're flying under the radar, and arguably, we have these two guys that won Super Bowls together now, albeit Jimmy G was the backup on the team, but you're still playing with the guy who was the quarterback coach, right, and coached, arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time to multiple Super Bowls. So I absolutely don't see why the Raiders, maybe just the defense is the one issue with the team, but they still have Devontae Adams. I really like Josh Jacobs as running back as well. So I think the offense is there for sure.
Yeah, and the thing too, they got the swagger. I mean, last year, remember they beat Kansas City, and then they took a bus ride around Arrowhead Stadium, basically just pissing off the fans in Kansas City. And you're like, okay, that's a Raider thing to do, right? I mean, that's what you expect. You expect the Raiders to come into your house, beat you, and then taunt you for it.
Ranger Stadium, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically saying, it's like the U, right? They come in, they beat you, and then they basically just run you out of your own house. So So yeah, I like the Raiders this year. I don't know what I like them to do yet because I haven't had much of a time to look at it. But there's just to me, we always have a couple of teams that fly under the radar. And for me, in 2023, the Raiders, I'm going to keep an eye on that team because I just think there's something special's going on out there. And you got two guys, McDaniels, who's had a chance at coaching before and it didn't work. Jimmy G, who's had, a couple of different stops that didn't work. They've got those chips on the shoulder. They are working together. They work really well together in New England. Can they replicate anything near what they did in New England out in the desert? And I think we'll see. But it does, to me, play to a really cool vibe out there that, don't pay attention to us. That's okay. We don't, you don't have to watch us because at the end of the day, we'd like to sneak up on you. So we'll see how that comes up. And it's not unlike Baker Mayfield and Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay, where they both have something to prove. And I think they really want to do it. That storyline is going to be an interesting one, just like the Deshaun Watson thing in Cleveland. He's got a whole season now to play. Put your money where your mouth is, and let's see what you can do in a conference where defense has always been first, and it's going to be a tough time. I think Deshaun Watson's going to learn whether he truly is, worth all that cash because, Mike Tomlin with that defense that he has at Pittsburgh all the time, the Ravens defense, even Cincinnati's defense, not a bad defense. So yeah, those are some storylines that we definitely are going to have a fun looking at. Real quick, today they're meeting in Dallas for college football playoffs, and they're going to do 12 spots, which they give the initial spots go to the what was the Power Five, which doesn't exist anymore. So the first 4 spots will go to conference champions from the Power conferences, so the SEC, ACC, Big 12, and who did I forget? Oh, Big 10 conference. We'll get those first 4 slots, and that leaves 8 slots that will be open for teams from the group of 6 and any other teams that are there. My understanding is since the PAC has dissolved and they haven't decided what exactly it's going to do, not necessarily dissolved, but they're down to PAC-2 at the moment, or PAC-4, that they've decided to wait to figure out how, who gets the slots and in what order. I would like to see it. Frankly, I'd like to be seeded by like it is with the NCAA tournament, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I think the SEC, the Big Ten, for sure, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to want extra slots. So how many of those 8 slots are, swallowed up by those 2 behemoths? I have no idea, but it's going to be a few. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I think the SEC for sure, but I don't know. Maybe the Big Ten, like 2. But
they get. I mean, come on, they get juice, right? Whether they're good or not, they're going to get the juice. I mean, there's no way. I argued for hours last year that Michigan and Ohio State were not did not deserve to both be in the playoffs. On one side, I was right. On the other side, Ohio State did get a win, but they got beaten by Georgia. Georgia took. It was a little closer than Georgia liked, and then they decided, okay, let's just take TCU out to the barn and beat the little daylights out of them. So that was that. But and there's a lot of smack talk in the Big 12 this year, which I think is interesting.
With the Big 12 athletic director as well.
Yeah, and with you're sitting there going, okay, Brett Yermark is mouthing off, and he's the commissioner, and you've got coaches going. I'm like, wait a minute. Oklahoma and Texas are on the way out the door. Okay. Maybe Oklahoma might be the best team in that conference. I don't know. To me, it's a very top to bottom. I mean, anybody in that conference could possibly win that conference. There's really not. But they're not. I guarantee you, and TCU will tell you this. They're not going to beat Georgia. They're not going to beat anybody at the top of the tower of the SEC. It's not going to happen. And so we'll see. But yeah, they're definitely mouthing off real good, chirping on people. Whether it's warranted or not, remains to be seen. But that's
and I think Yormark did a little more damage than helping out there, because I guarantee Texas has that Texas Tech game circled on their calendar this year.
They're going to want to just thrash, anybody in that conference. And quietly, I have a feeling that, Texas always gets the pub. Oklahoma gets the wins. I have a feeling that, Brent Venables out in Norman is going to go, this is our last season in this conference. Why don't we just go out there and kick the living crap out of everybody we can get our hands on? And I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma, sails through that conference and ends up being in the championship game. And if not the outright straight up champions, I don't think they're going to lose too many games. They had a bad by Oklahoma standards season last year, but that was not fair because Lincoln Riley took half the team with him. It's like he took a bus with of Oklahoma players with him. So it really didn't give Brett Venables a lot left in the cupboard, but he was quick to restock. And
he was also really focused on fixing that defense, which
that's his stock and trade. Yeah, I mean Venables' stock and trade at Clemson was the defense. And
so now he's had a year to establish that.
Yeah. And he's had a year to figure out suddenly you look up and Lincoln Riley's in Los Angeles. So your quarterback, who was a Heisman Trophy quarterback, is gone. And so is 5 or 6 other players that you thought were going to be there that, again, Lincoln Riley decided to take with him. So we shall see. But I think it's going to be interesting what goes on in the Big 12 this year. And I do think that Oklahoma is gonna give a hard time. And like you said, Texas has got Arch Manning. I don't know whether Arch Manning's going to be Peyton Manning or Eli Manning or Archie Manning or just a Manning. We'll just
Cooper Manning.
Cooper Manning, probably closer to Hooper Manning than Arch. But we'll see how that works out. And it should be. I mean, look, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. It's easy to talk. It's going to be very interesting how that whole situation works out. I know Saban's not saying anything that scares me.
I saw a press conference where he was glowing the other day.
Oh God.
He was not his usual angry self. He was very happy, which
maybe it's the Aflac commercials, that done it for him.
Well, it makes me wonder what's brewing down there in Alabama, because from what I've heard is there's a lot of last year he felt there was too much expectation on the team, and the team just wasn't good enough or couldn't handle the expectation. But this year he's all about getting the hunger back to win, and from what I can tell, the players are not happy that Georgia's the team to beat in the SEC. So they definitely are getting that hunger back. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. One of the players I even believe said, I think this team is going to shock the world. So we'll see if they go undefeated and beat LSU at the end of their season, then that'll shock the world for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, and the irony of this is there's probably, I had counted at one point, I can't remember the exact number, but there's between 8 and 12 players on the Alabama team that were recruited in the final year that Kirby Smart was was the defensive coordinator, at Alabama. So there's some Kirby Smart guys on Alabama's football team. And Georgia, there's no reason to believe they're not going to be, kicking around. LSU, we'll find out. They're going to play FSU, and we'll see what Brian Kelly's got. Lord knows.
One thing I'll say about Georgia is their schedule is a joke this year.
Yeah, they do not play any heavy duty. Although, again, under the radar, keep an eye on Tennessee.
That's the only team they play. Literally, I was going to say at the end of the season, that's the only remotely close team they play.
They play Florida, but God knows Graham Mertz could be basically in bits and pieces by that point. Tennessee, Josh Heupel, what he's doing up there is pretty special, and so we'll see. I mean, they ran that offense, man. That offense scored tons last year. So,
he's another one that's angry because apparently the Athletic released an article and they listed him as a low-tier head coach.
Yeah, I wonder how that works.
Yeah, he was not happy to see that his name is not with the Kirby Smarts and the Savins and is down on the lower tier apparently. Which I disagree. He's turned that program around in the 3 years that he's been there.
Well, yeah, but he also took UCF to an undefeated season. I mean, so it's not like this guy can't coach. This guy can coach on pretty much any level you want to give him.
I agree. I think he's a very good coach.
His problem is he's in the SEC. I mean, so what are you going to do? But Alex Ghosh, who ran the offense last year, is the head coach now at South Florida. But the offense is there, and they can play, and they definitely can score points, and it's exactly the kind of offense that he likes to play, which is run and gun and put points on the board. If they can lock down some defense, they'll play. They'll have some pretty good have a pretty good season ahead of them. But I'm thinking Tennessee is one of those teams you got to watch because they just might sneak up and bite you in that regard. I mean, as I said, LSU, you don't have to. Recruiting at LSU is pretty simple if you're Brian Kelly. I mean, you just don't let anybody out of the state of Louisiana, and you'll be fine. But Alabama, all of those, it's gonna be a wild season. There's probably 5 or 6 teams that can get in there and give grief if they have if the ball bounces correctly for them, and we'll see. But I mean, we saw what happened with USC in that game against San Jose State. I'm anxious to see Michael Penix, kid from Washington, Nix, kid from Oregon. We got tomorrow night. We get to see whether or not Utah comes out with Cam Rising or a group of quarterbacks. But it's going to be a fun season, and we'll be here, folks, for you to talk about it. But all right, my friend, let's take a quick look at the scoreboard, and then we'll touch base with you on what you are doing tonight. So let me refresh so that we get the latest of all the scores. And here we go. Mid-6, bless you. Mid-6, it is the Angels still holding on to a 5-3 lead over the Philadelphia Phillies. Bottom of the 5th, 7-5. The Orioles picked up another run. 7-5 White Sox leading that game at Camden Yard. Guardians and Twins, 2-0. The Guardians are losing to the Twins. Padres Cardinals, that game has started, and the Padres have really blown up. They got 3 runs in the first inning, and they're now in mid-second. Cardinals down 3-0. Brewers Cubbies, well, the Cubbies have scored twice as many runs as they scored last night. Bottom of the second at the friendly confines, it is the Cubs to the Brewers, nothing. White Sox Blue Jays. Oh, I'm sorry. White Sox Blue Jays. No, that would be the Nationals. how I forget that one. He's in warm up. They haven't quite started that game. 3:45, Reds and what is my problem? Reds and Giants. That game will be Green throwing for the Reds, Webb for San Francisco. Astros, Red Sox. We got Valdez pitching for Houston. We got Crawford pitching for the Red Sox. We got the Athletics and Mariners. Neal for Oakland. Miller, yay, Miller's our boy. For Seattle. Rangers at the Mets. Dunning for Texas. Rays for the Mets. Rays, Marlins. It's Zach Eflin for Tampa Bay and Luzardo pitching for the Marlins. Yankees, Tigers. That's Garrett Cole against Detroit. Mr. White. Pirates. We got a pitcher for Pirates now. Jackson. He's going to go against Zerpa. For the Royals, that game is a 8:10 start, 8:40 start. Braves, Rockies, that's Vince versus Freeland. Colorado has Freeland. And then Arizona has got Plumfott pitching for them. The Dodgers got Perot. And so there you go. That's your scoreboard. And tell us, we all know where to find you down below in the box. But what are we looking for tonight at Big Al and the rest of the gangs?
Yeah, so you can get my plays at bigal.com and pickadvisor.com. As you said, both of those links are in the description below. I don't have any MLB up tonight. Didn't like the card. All I have are 4 MLS plays, including my game of the month. So you can go check those out.
We didn't talk about the MLS. That was my bad.
Oh, no worries. It is a big midweek slate tonight, but got a lot of action in the MLS. So if you're looking for those MLS plays, you can go buy them.
Well, you got a rematch at 7:30 on Apple TV. It's the free game of the night. There are 3 free games on Apple TV tonight. The first one, Inter Miami, and that's a rematch in Nashville. That game. Is that again, I'm sorry, I apologize for this, but I don't know because I've seen it in 2 different places. Nashville and Inter Miami, New England at Red Bull, and New York City versus Montreal. Those are your free, and Toronto, Philadelphia. Those are your free games, early games on Apple TV Plus. There's Dynamo at Columbus Crew. That's an 8:30 game. That's the free game, the late game for that. So, and everything else is on MLS Pass. So, real quick.
That one's in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. So, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Charlotte, Orlando City, Inter Miami and Nashville, New England at Red Bull, New York City at Montreal, Toronto at Philly, Austin at Seattle, Chicago at Vancouver, Houston at Columbus, Minnesota at Colorado, St. Louis at Dallas, Portland at Real Salt Lake, and the Earthquake is against the Galaxy in Los Angeles. So there's your games tonight in the MLS. So anyway, there we go, my friend. And Pick Advisor, and there's no baseball tonight, but you got some other stuff. Foxy dropped by to say, there you go.
Yeah, they beat Bolivar last night. I stayed off that game because I didn't think Bolivar was going to go in and beat Internacional in Brazil, and that one was like a minus 400. But Internacional, ever since they picked up Eder Valencia, he has definitely been the difference on that team. Not just last night, but in pretty much every game they've played. And so good on them. Internacional was actually a team I picked before the Copa Libertadores started. I picked them to win in an article back like early in the spring. So definitely rooting for Internacional. Personally, I had Estudiantes last night who won 1-0 against Corinthians, but then got kicked out in penalties. But at that point, didn't care, Jim. We got the win in the 90 minutes.
Well, it's funny because you had games last night that the number 1 showed up a lot. The Cubs number 1. It's like, okay.
Yeah, 1-0 Estudiantes. I had 1-0 with that Cubs game.
Right.
I had a 1-1 match in the EFL Cup. I had Tottenham, but they lost. I expected them to do a bit better. But I also had Crystal Palace, who ended up they gave up a goal in the first minute of the first half and a goal in the first minute of the second half to go down 2-0, and then they scored 4 goals in like a span of 5 minutes to win 4-2.
There you go. Gotta love it. All right, guys. We will be back tomorrow. It's game day. There's games, soccer games, and then there's football games, and we will give you everything you need to know about both of them come tomorrow. And real quick, get Foxy in for one more. He has something he wanted to ask you about this. So there you go.
Yeah, I think Palmeiras might just clean up the competition, Foxy, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, we're gonna have some Brazilian sides in there for sure.
Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Okay, guys. We'll see you tomorrow for Amadeus.